I love DreamWorks' She-Ra. When I first saw the show being advertised 2 years back, I thought it looked okay, but I didn't go out of my way to watch it when it first came out. Fast forward months later, and I decided to finally give the show a watch, and that was a great decision. The series has beautiful animation. Aside from the theme song, which is just kinda in my opinion, the music is absolutely incredible. It's surprisingly really funny, which is mostly due to just how well these characters bounce off each other and how amazing every single performance is. The main characters have a lot of depth to them and are just delightful to watch, and the secondary characters are great as well. Even the ones I didn't like as much in Season 1 were able to really grow on me and become some of my favorites by the end. By the time I release this video, it'll have been over half a year since the show came to its beautiful conclusion. While a lot of the show has managed to stick with me, there's one part of it that has stuck with me the most. This is Catra and Adora. Adora is the one on the left with the red jacket and the ponytail, and Catra is the one on the right with the ripped leggings and the bad haircut. Remember that now. In the final season, these two form a relationship, and the story focuses on that a lot. Not only is this a huge landmark for queer rep in Western animation, but this is honestly one of my favorite relationships in animation history. Ever since the finale came out, I've wanted to express how much I love this relationship. So let's get this started. Catra and Adora grew up in the Fright Zone, where kids are barely fed, forced to fight each other, and trained to kill princesses. So, yeah, the Fright Zone isn't exactly the most welcoming place in the world, but Catra and Adora still seem relatively happy. When we see them as kids, they don't seem all that bothered by the dark, smoggy junkyard they've spent their childhood in, and that's because they value each other. But there is a reason I say relatively happy and not completely happy, and that reason is silence. My view on Shadow Weaver has changed a lot over time. Shadow Weaver is a nasty, unapologetic abuser, hiding from her past and her insecurities. Her design also reflects this. I used to think she mainly had an effect on Catra, and it seems that way when you look at some of these scenes, but some people tend to ignore the way she treated Adora and how it went on to affect her throughout the rest of the series. There's only one thing that Shadow Weaver cares about, and that's getting as much power as possible. Not just power in runestone magic power, but also the power as in her high position in the Horde. And she tries to make Adora the same way. She doesn't see Adora as a complex person who needs to build her own paths or dreams. She sees her as a weapon that she can use to her advantage. But Catra and Adora were best friends, and that got in the way of what Shadow Weaver wanted. Adora is clearly fond of her, but Shadow Weaver treats Catra as if she's the one holding her back. Catra is made out to be an awful character whenever she shows affection to Adora because, again, Shadow Weaver sees Adora as a weapon, not a person who needs love. But that's enough about Shadow Weaver, we'll get back to her later. Shadow Weaver's treatment towards Catra affects the way she thinks and acts. Since she was scolded when she loved Adora, she buries her emotions deep down where no one can sense them. And she does it for so long that eventually she can't even sense them anymore. She resents pretty much everybody except Adora. The one person Catra still has affection for, even if she doesn't outright show it. Can I just say how great the character introductions are in this first episode? And this doesn't just apply to Catra and Adora. We see Adora focused, getting ready for the Horde exercise ahead of her, seeming passionate about fighting for them. Then a few minutes later we see Catra coming in after the training is nearly over, not doing any of it except pushing a robot into a hole. It's clear that her position in the Horde doesn't matter to her all that much. Also, I love how her first line in this show is,
"Hey Adora, how's it hanging?"
A few scenes later, Catra says she wants to get out of the Fright Zone and wonders what the rest of the world holds. So yeah, she's a Disney princess, which is ironic considering she's one of the only female characters in the show who's not a princess. Anyway, Adora is really the only person Catra has left, but then she leaves during Catra's attempt to find adventure in the Great Wide somewhere. Adora finds the sword, and the next day she goes back to find it and discovers what her destiny was. Then Catra shows up, thinking Adora would just come back to the Horde with her, but she doesn't. Adora does something Catra has never done before. She chose. Nobody was forcing Adora to leave the Horde, but she did it anyway because she's able to tap into her emotions and do what she thinks is right. Catra isn't. When Adora asks Catra to come with her and leave her life in the Horde behind, you'd think she'd go with her, but she doesn't. Catra and Adora have been in the Horde for so long, and Adora made a promise to look out for her. Even if Adora begged her to come, Catra didn't see it as Adora looking out for her. She saw it as a betrayal. In the next episode, we get one of the best scenes in the entire season. It's preceded by Lonnie talking to the other cadets about the fight with She-Ra. At this point, Catra is the only person who knows She-Ra is actually just Adora, so this line hits extra hard.
Easy, Catra. Adora's not here to protect you anymore.
Catra doesn't show any concern at first. Then a couple of scenes later, Catra goes to her bed. She's alone. She looks at the drawing at the side of the bed, the drawing that symbolizes that Catra and Adora would always look out for each other. That's not what happened. Not in her eyes. Adora is gone. She left the Horde, while Catra remains here, with nobody else to turn to. But we're only 3 episodes into a 13-episode season and a 52-episode series, so Ketra has to have something else to do. Since Adora is gone now, Ketra puts her focus onto the only other thing in her life that kinda sorta mattered to her, moving up the ranks in the Horde. And this affects her relationship with the other characters who are introduced from this point on. Mainly Scorpia, who's just an incredible character. When she's first introduced, she seems like just a comic relief, and yeah, she is kind of that, but she might be one of the most important characters in the show. Also, she's just flat out hilarious. She comes more into play in seasons 3 and 4, but in the first 2 seasons, she's shown to have the hots for Ketra and does everything she can to impress her and make her happy. Standard crush stuff. But now that the one person that mattered to Ketra is gone and she thinks her only purpose is to just move up the ranks in the Horde, Scorpia's actions of affection just sort of fly over her head. However, this changes after they actually leave the Horde for a brief period of time, but that comes way later. So for now, let's talk about the main character of the show, Adora. So this show is really good at writing side characters, but a show still needs an interesting main character as well. Thankfully, Adora has pretty much everything that makes for a compelling main character. Season 1 Ketra is pretty hard to sum up in just a sentence, but Adora is relatively easy. She finds a sword, she leaves the Horde, she becomes She-Ra, and she makes new friends. The end. I feel like we know just enough about her character early on to like her, but also stay invested in her character as the series goes on. As the series continues, we go more into her past, where she came from, and why all that stuff happened to her. Adora's arc in the second half of the show is able to turn her from red jacket blonde girl to one of the most interesting characters DreamWorks has ever crafted. Going back to what I said a few seconds ago, all 4 of those things are important, but the one that plays the most into Ketra and Adora's relationships is becomes She-Ra. There's a really great episode that centers around this, and it's called Promise, which seems to be a fan favorite. At this point, episode 11, things have kinda changed between them, but it's clear neither one of them wants the other to go down the path they're going on. Adora is still asking Ketra to come join the rebellion, and Ketra wants Adora to come back and things to go back to normal. Ketra thinks Adora left because she had to. She was the special, the one destined to be She-Ra. But she left because Adora thought it was the right thing to do, and she had grown to love the new people around her. Ketra is mad at She-Ra, not Adora. A detail I love in this scene here is how Ketra cuts the vine thing Adora is hanging onto with the sword of protection, symbolizing how she thinks the whole She-Ra thing is dragging her down. If this were an inferior show, Ketra would probably spend the entire episode trying to take the sword away from Adora and comedically failing until we get to this scene. But instead, we get a string of flashbacks showing Ketra and Adora's past, and we can see how much Adora finding the sword has changed their lives, and why Ketra would hate Adora's new destiny. And over time, Adora grows to hate her destiny too. Seasons 3, 4, and 5 all revolve around this, and I think each season is a natural progression of Adora's character. Season 2 is amazing, but neither Ketra or Adora have many rich character moments in it, and it's mostly used to focus on world building. I also won't be talking about these Swiftwind shorts, even though they're awesome and you should definitely watch them. Right off the bat, Season 3 does a great job of tying its plot into this. Shadow Weaver comes to Bright Moon and talks about how Adora is the first one. Light Hope shows her being thrown through the portal. Then Adora, Bo, and Glimmer go search for answers, or more specifically, a spaceship in a desert, and hijinks ensue. There are 3 scenes in the season that I can only describe as heartbreaking, each more so than the last. In the first episode of the season, after Adora is told by Light Hope she was brought through a portal from another planet, wait, does that make her an alien? And made into a Horde soldier, the first things that come out of her mouth are questions. But she's told that it doesn't matter and that it's not important. Light Hope tells her that it was her destiny to be She-Ra, and Adora couldn't have a say in that. Also, this line,
"This is your destiny. You do not choose. You were chosen."
Wow. This is made even more powerful by the next scene I want to talk about, which occurs 2 episodes later after the gang gets to the spooky spaceship. One that's been foreshadowed from the very beginning. A hologram of Mara pops up, and the only thing it says is,
"I am Mara, She-Ra of Etheria, and I am gone."
Adora is fed up. All she wants are answers, and then she gets them. She finds a message from Mara from the day Etheria was disconnected from the rest of the universe, and she apologizes that she couldn't get rid of She-Ra. She-Ra is the reason Adora is here, the reason she was taken from her family, the reason she can't choose, because this is who she was destined to be. After that, Adora gets kidnapped and taken back to the Fright Zone, where the portal is completed, and Ketra pulls the lever. We'll get to her in a bit. Adora wakes up in an alternate reality Shrek Forever After style. Here, she never found the sword, she never met Bo and Glimmer, and she never became She-Ra. She's back in the Horde, who are winning the war with her help. Even Ketra is happy, so it's apparent to Adora that things are not normal. During this, she keeps getting visions of Raz and Mara's name until they drive her crazy and she goes looking for even more answers. She tries explaining how the world isn't perfect to Ketra and takes her with her, but of course, she doesn't want that. Ketra tries to convince her to stay, telling her that life is perfect, but Adora doesn't. Then Ketra falls into the void with some great callback imagery to Promise. Adora could just give up now, just like Ketra did, but she's still fixated on fixing reality because she feels like she needs to. Adora goes back to find Bow and Glimmer, who go to find Entrapta, and they're told that they need to remove the sword from the portal and everything will go back to normal. And reality keeps collapsing wherever she goes, and the people around her keep disappearing. Then we finally reach the third scene, the big one, Queen Angela's death. For me personally, Angela is on the lower end of She-Ra characters. She's still good, but she never seemed all that interesting compared to some other secondary characters like Scorpia or Entrapta. But this scene really makes me wish we saw more of her in the first 2 seasons. Like, wow. It's really hard to explain this scene, so I'll just play the part that sticks out to me the most.
You inspired us. You inspired me. Not because it was your destiny, but because you never let fear stop you. And now, I choose to be brave.
And with that, she flies up into the portal to pull out the sword. And just before she does so, she delivers her last words to Adora. Instead of saying, "Be the She-Ra" or "Save the world, I believe in you," she says, "Take care of each other." What a scene. I think we need to step back and digest. All 3 scenes I just talked about have somebody talking to Adora about her destiny, and they all approach it differently. First Lighthope, then Mara, then Angela. Lighthope tells her that being She-Ra is her destiny and nothing else matters. Her past isn't important, her friends aren't important, all that's important is what's expected of her. Mara tells Adora that she's sorry that she couldn't end She-Ra for good, that she couldn't stop Adora's destiny. A destiny where she can't choose, she can't make her own paths, where she's nothing more than a weapon. Sound familiar? And finally, Angela. Adora keeps insisting she go into the portal, pull out the sword, and never return, because it's her destiny. But Angela doesn't want that. None of her friends do. Those lines I showed earlier perfectly sum up Adora's core. She didn't leave the Horde, leave her old friends, leave behind the life she once had because people were telling her to. She left because it's what she thought was right and what she decided to do. The thing about life is, it's not about the have-tos, it's about the choose-tos. Adora was letting her destiny define her, instead of her defining her destiny. It's unbelievable how much emotional baggage is in this season, and keep in mind, it's the shortest and it might be the funniest.
Right? It's like, what, you lose a bet?
But sadly, for a short period of time, the show kinda nosedived. So, unpopular opinion, Season 4 is the weakest. I still think it's quite good, and definitely makes the series as a whole worth a watch, but I don't know, it just didn't immerse me when comparing it to the other 4 seasons. Especially the 2 it was sandwiched in between. It's fine that it doesn't want to open up with a lot of emotional baggage, after all, we just got done with this. But from the very first episode, the show seems to have lost a lot of the charm that made the first 2 seasons so great. The humor isn't as sharp, they made Swiftwind annoying somehow, the characters aren't fun to watch, and the action and dialogue have been downgraded, at least to me. And of course, Glimmer. I actually really like Glimmer in the other 4 seasons. Not as much as some other characters, but she's still fairly well written. Here she feels like a completely different character. Her actions are understandable sometimes, but other times it feels like things the old Glimmer wouldn't do. One of the things I wish they did in seasons 2 and 3 is touch upon the idea of Glimmer becoming queen. We could have had Angela talk to Glimmer about it, and then her feeling conflicted, leading to her feeling even more disappointed in herself when she screws up. And then when Angela, you know, the things she does as queen would tie in a little more to her character instead of just happening for plot reasons and feeling like they come out of nowhere. However, the payoff of this in the next season is actually really well handled, so I guess the problem isn't that huge. Adora's not too great either. Compared to season 3, she doesn't really grow at all until like the last 4 episodes. It feels like after what we just went through, the writers just sorta sidelined her for a bit. Thankfully, the show starts getting emotionally investing again with episode 6 and funny again with episode 7. Where this is definitely the worst season in terms of building on the heroes, this might be my favorite in terms of building on the villains. Unlike Glimmer, where the character change just sorta happened, Ketra and Scorpia's growth in this season feels like it's carried directly over from the 3rd season. When done right, putting characters in a new location can make for some great character growth, and that's what this is. I've already mentioned how Ketra put all her focus onto moving up the ranks in the Horde, but in this episode, she's not in the Horde. Yeah, the reason Ketra and Scorpia are here is to get First One's tech for the Horde, but as the episode progresses, it becomes less important to them. And Ketra is finally able to pick up on Scorpia's affection for her. There were some small moments where this happened in Season 2, but those were brief and didn't really mean anything in the long run. Now that she's away from the Horde and the people that call her worthless, she's finally able to open her heart up to Scorpia and show actual appreciation for someone else after Adora left. Scorpia likes this and she wants it to stay like this. She knows Ketra isn't happy in the Fright Zone and Ketra knows that too, but she still goes back. She's convinced herself that she was made to be a villain, made to keep rising up the ranks, and after she hears that Shadow Weaver abandoned her for Adora, they go back to the Horde where Ketra pulls the previously mentioned lever. Despite the people closest to her, the people she trusts the most, telling her not to. In the alternate reality, Ketra literally starts crumbling to pieces and she tells Adora that she's the reason Ketra ended up like this. But really, that's not true at all. Adora decided to leave the Horde, yes, but she begged Ketra to come with her, but she didn't because they had been in the Fright Zone, a place where Ketra buried her emotions for so long and she didn't know how to make real decisions. She just stuck to what she knew. She has all these opportunities to start a new life, but she doesn't. Ketra pulled the lever because all the decisions she had made led her to become consumed by rage, to the point where nothing else mattered to her. So when Season 4 opens up and reality is back to normal, it makes sense that she would go back to convincing herself that her position in the Horde is the only important thing. Remember when I said Scorpia was a really important player in Ketra's arc? Well, so is this season's new addition, Double Trouble, who is also a really amazing character. Their interactions with Ketra are the best part of the season, and they make the first half all the more worthwhile. Also, the voice performance.
So despondent. Such emotion. Oh, it was breathtaking.
Flawless. Double Trouble is pretty much the only person in the show who supports Ketra's goal of becoming more and more powerful and stopping anything that gets in her way. I mean, yeah, Scorpia, but she doesn't have any strong investment towards the Horde or being a force captain and whatnot. Double Trouble powers Ketra even more, to the point where her emotions and feelings are buried even deeper than they were before. The only person she cares about is Double Trouble, and that's only because they help Ketra with her plans and Ketra would be a step behind without them. Everyone else she doesn't show the slightest bit of need for, and that begins to drive them away, just like with Shadow Weaver. Scorpia is of course the nicest creature that ever lived, but in this season she learns that maybe there's such a thing as too nice. Up until the episode Princess Scorpia, she's always trying to fix Ketra's life, standing up for her, being by her side, looking on the bright side of things, trying to cheer her up, those sort of things. In Season 3, Ketra finally started to realize this and gave back to Scorpia. But now Ketra is more power hungry than ever, and she says that Scorpia is getting in her way and holding her back, to which she replies,
You're a bad friend.
and she leaves the Fright Zone to go to Bright Moon with the princesses, where she forms a beautiful bond with Perfuma. This may seem like a sudden character change for some, but for me, no, not really. Scorpia is still the nicest scorpion thing in existence, but I don't see her leaving the Horde as giving up on Ketra. She's tried all that she could, but Ketra still goes back to these tendencies. Just like with Adora, Scorpia can't make decisions for Ketra, despite her best efforts. People need to find themselves. Other people can help them, but in the long run, it's that person's decision if they want to go down a new path or continue down the one they're already going on. By leaving, I think Scorpia was trying to help herself and Ketra, because after that episode, we see her not act like herself. She should be happy. She's winning. She's finally accomplished what she convinced herself was her life's goal. But she feels empty. Scorpia, the person who cared for her most, is gone. This is the point where you might be noticing a pattern of Ketra repeatedly pushing people away and making her life more and more miserable. Adora, Shadow Weaver, Scorpia, Lonnie, Rogelio, Kyle, each time this happens she feels sad, but she's unable to express that with the person she pushed away, because she doesn't feel like she can do it without it holding her back. So instead, she keeps trying to move up in the Horde, hoping that it will fill the hole in her heart. But it doesn't. And when Double Trouble returns from Bright Moon, they shapeshift into all the people Ketra has pushed away, telling her that she was the problem all along. And her not willing to change, apologize, be a better person is what led her to where she is now. She can try to convince herself that she's happy, that she's got everything she's ever wanted, but she's broken. Seems like the ends of the series. Ketra has come to terms with her actions and the rebellion is winning. This should be the end. But there's one teeny tiny problem.
Aliens. Oh, snap.
Season 5 is absolutely incredible. I was a little worried going in because although it could serve as the ending, Season 4 left a lot of characters and character relationships open, and I didn't know how they would wrap them up in a satisfying way before the credits of episode 13. Thankfully, all the character relationships feel complete, and I'm not just talking about the romantic relationships either. Almost every one of them centers around the main theme the show is trying to get across, but we'll get to that later. If you read the plot synopsis of each season, this one would sound pretty stupid. Space? Aliens? People getting chipped? But after watching the first 4 seasons, this doesn't feel out of place at all. Space and the bigger universe have been foreshadowed since literally the first shot of the first episode, and I've already explained how Adora ties into the whole other worlds thing. It feels like this was the direction the story was meant to go in, instead of the writers just throwing the characters into space because Etheria got boring. You might have noticed that I've been talking about Ketra and Adora and what they go through before this point, mostly separately. When you think about it, they don't share that many scenes in these 3 seasons. I actually don't see this as a flaw. Both of them have different arcs which come together to be completed at the end, and I think the fact that they don't interact much makes their arcs even stronger, especially Ketra's. I didn't go over Adora in Season 4 because I found Ketra way more interesting, but let's briefly skim through that. As the season goes on, Adora is pressured more and more to use the Heart of Etheria to defeat the Horde for good. That's basically a bunch of magic stored inside the planet that when accessed makes the princesses more powerful, but also has enough power to destroy the entire planet. And She-Ra and her sword just so happen to be what can unlock it. Everyone around her is telling her that she's the only one that can do it and she was meant to do it. She doesn't get to choose. But right as the planet is about to be destroyed, Adora does something she's never done before. She breaks free of her destiny. Adora can't transform anymore. She's lost the thing that gave her importance. Season 5 opens up with Ketra and Adora at their lowest points. Adora is doing everything she can to protect everyone who needs protecting. She feels like she didn't live up to the She-Ra name like others wanted her to. Knowing Adora, it makes perfect sense that she would want to do everything she can to save Glimmer and the universe, even if the problem is a lot bigger than her. Meanwhile, up on Horde Prime's ship, Ketra feels stuck. I mean both literally and emotionally. Ketra is now on the ship inhabited only by Horde Prime and his clones. She's lost everyone in her life and finds herself with nobody to turn to. Except for Glimmer, who is also taken from Etheria. I'm not as harsh towards Season 4 as I was the first time I watched it because Glimmer's stupid decisions and neglecting her friends leads us here, where the only people Ketra and Glimmer can connect with are each other. Ketra and Glimmer are actually pretty similar in Season 4 when you think about it. Both put all their focus onto their new position of power, not taking other people's thoughts into account. This pushes the people closest to them away until they feel alone and empty. Like they've lost something they feel is impossible to get back. Glimmer's actions contrast amazingly to Ketra, with Ketra's decision to pull the lever and Glimmer's decision to use the heart despite people telling her not to. Their interactions are incredible, and they feel so real in terms of the characters we're talking about. My favorite scene in the first half of the season is when Ketra goes to talk to Glimmer after she's told there's a ship heading towards them. They both realize it's Adora, being the hero she longs to be even with the odds against her. Ketra doesn't want to do anything at first. She's already dug this deep dark hole that she believes is impossible to get out of, and she would only make things worse because she thinks that's who she is. Glimmer tells her to do one good thing in her life, and she runs off. Ketra runs from a new path. Then we make it to what might be the most important scene to Ketra's character. She's standing in a hallway with multiple paths to go down. She's alone. No one else is there to drag her down a path or convince her to change. What happens to her next depends completely on her. And then, it happens. Ketra comes face to face with the one thing she can't run from, her emotions. She gets a vision with her and Adora as kids, with the promise Adora made to her, that they would always be friends. And going back to what Double Trouble was telling her, Ketra was the problem. She was the one that broke herself. And when something breaks, you have to fix it. Ketra goes back. She saves Glimmer, not to save herself, but to do her part in her promise with Adora. In the 30 seconds she talks to Adora, she tells her to take Glimmer and not risk herself by coming to the ship. She has nothing to gain from this. This won't make her more powerful. Her intention is to save Adora and finally end the pain she's put on all these other people. But Adora isn't one to let her go out like this. It baffles me. This plot point could have been so easy to get wrong, thus screwing up the rest of Ketra's character arc. She could have went, "Hey Adora, trade you your sparkly friend for your love and affection." Or Adora could have gotten to the ship and decided to save her along with Glimmer for no reason other than plot. So after a fun episode where we meet some great new characters, the gang heads to save Ketra. Here's where the animation becomes super important. She-Ra doesn't have the best animation in the world, but it definitely improves with each season. And here we can tap into the characters' emotions just by looking at their facial expressions, particularly their eyes. This is a really great substitute for Adora coming to the ship without the whole Glimmer thing, and then a couple of sentences from her convincing Ketra to change. But instead, Ketra has already shown that there is hope for her, and Adora tries to get her to fight the new destructive tendencies Prime has given her, knowing that it would be better if she let her real emotions shine through. That's really clever. I think now we should talk about the villain of the season, Horde Prime. He's not really the best villain ever, but I don't really think the story needs him to be. He does his job well as an antagonist, posing as a threat for the main characters, but you might notice, Adora, the main character of the show, only comes face to face with Horde Prime twice in the entire season. Once in this scene in Save the Cat, and once again in this scene in Return to the Fright Zone. During both of these, Prime does an attempt to take out Adora herself. In the first one it's Ketra who does this, and in the second one it's Scorpia. The first one is definitely a lot more important to Ketra and Adora's relationship. Horde Prime serves as a threat to the characters both physically and emotionally. He can see Adora's willingness to save Ketra, and he can see that she believes Ketra can change. So instead of fighting her, he leaves Ketra to do that. Probably the most important person in Adora's life. But we see glimpses of the real Ketra peeking through even before the chip breaks. And when it starts to, we get this.
I'm going to take you home.
Promise.
I promise.
Adora.
Disappointing. Some creatures are destined only for destruction.
Ketra's Prime switch keeps flipping on and off, and this is in response to her emotions. I have no trouble believing that Ketra would be scared of going back to Adora after all that's happened. But right before Ketra can take Adora's hand, Ketra's old emotions turn on the Prime switch, and she falls back with Adora following her. Ketra is lying on the ground, close to death. Adora is weak, but she still musters up enough strength to make it over to her. She holds her close as the clones approach. This looks like the end for them, but it isn't. With a gentle stroke of Ketra's hair, She-Ra returns. The way they bring her back is absolutely powerful. The old sword is never fixed or magically glued back together again. The new sword isn't really a normal object either. She-Ra isn't powered by a sword anymore. She-Ra is powered by love. And this is evident in her brief transformation in the previous episode and the new design. I love how they didn't keep the old one because I think that would have undermined the message quite a bit. This She-Ra design is way more reminiscent of Adora herself, with the ponytail, hair poof, and pants instead of shorts like the old She-Ra had. We also see parts in this design that are reminiscent of Adora's friends, Bo's chest heart, Ketra's old headgear, and part of Glimmer's boots, and I'll get into why this is later. So Adora wipes the floor with the clones and they escape. On the ship, she cradles Ketra in her arms until she wakes up. We get another "Hey Adora," and Adora brings her in for a hug, and Ketra hugs back. The next episode isn't quite my favorite, and it pales in comparison to Corridors and Save the Cat, but I have to give it a lot of credit for following up Save the Cat in a way that feels so real. For a show about magical princesses, Ketra in this episode and the way she reacts to everyone coming to save her is beautifully realistic. And pretty heart-wrenching. Same with the way Adora acts after she saved Ketra. This episode adds so much to the huge emotional investment I already had in both characters and makes the episodes that follow it even stronger. It makes perfect sense that Ketra wouldn't want to interact with anyone else on the ship. She's already come to terms with her past and the horrible things she's done, but she hasn't quite come to terms with her future. Ketra assumed she wouldn't have to because she didn't think anyone would come for her after she saved Glimmer, but she was proven wrong. Saving Glimmer was just one piece of this emotionally complex puzzle. Adora believes Ketra can change, and she's right, but Ketra is still a bit broken. Changing a character from bad to good can't be compared with a light switch. It's not that simple. Ketra isn't the only character in this show, and for a character like her where pushing away other people is what led her into a downward spiral, this episode where she finally has to confront the people she's affected is really interesting. And she's very frightened. I mean, yeah, there was that hug in the last episode, but that was more of a caught up in the moment sort of thing, given what had just happened. Ketra says she wants to be dropped off on another planet so she won't have to face these people, but it's also clear she doesn't want to go back into the rut she was in before. Eventually, Adora gets tired of waiting for Ketra to face Entrapta, so Entrapta goes to face her, and Ketra apologizes, and to her surprise, Entrapta forgives her, because Ketra has shown that she can be a good person. And just like Adora, Entrapta knows what will help Ketra get there. It's the other people in her life. Hiding from them or running away from them won't help her. It will only drift her further away from the reason she saved Glimmer, bringing her back to where she was. And this episode concludes with a simply beautiful scene where Ketra goes to eat with the others without any sort of push from anyone else. Hiding won't help her, and once she goes out and is greeted with Bo and Glimmer scooting aside to make room for her to sit with them and a smile from Adora, She gets that feeling of happiness that she hasn't felt in so long. Probably the only reason this episode isn't among one of my favorites is because of the B-plot back on Etheria. I love Spinnerella, Natasha, and Swiftwind, but I really don't like Frosta. It really stinks that the worst princess out of all of them sucks time away from this otherwise amazing episode. Ketra's arc is complete, right? She's left her evil ways behind, she's back with Adora, she's happy. But the season isn't even halfway done, and Ketra's arc isn't complete at all. There is another character who adds more conflict to these two's arc and connection. What character could that be?
Silence.
So Shadow Weaver hasn't had that much importance since the first season. She still has presence, but she's not really crucial to anyone else's character. In Season 2, she has a minor effect on Catra when she leaves the Fright Zone for Bright Moon, leading for Catra to pull the lever, but she doesn't really make that much of an impact on anyone else. In Seasons 3 and 4, she kind of acts like a plot device more than anything, or an object for Adora and Glimmer to fight about, without really having a deep effect on either of their characters. If we had a talking rock teaching Glimmer magic, then the story in Season 4 wouldn't change that much. Here she's crucial to the story as well as both Catra and Adora. After a string of really fun episodes, one of which is dedicated to Scorfuma, and the others that show Catra evolving as a person, not just showing her emotions but controlling them as well, you can tell she really wants to be better. She could have just stopped growing after the dinner scene where she's accepted by the people around her, but she didn't, and I love that. So after those, the characters meet up with the other protagonists who aren't chipped, and some of them go to the Fright Zone and try to unchip the ones who are. Towards the end, we get the second scene where Adora and Perfuma come face to face with Horde Prime that I mentioned earlier. Horde Prime orders the now chipped Scorpia to strike them. Perfuma tries to get Scorpia to break through Prime's control, and then she purposely misses them. Once Perfuma and Catra meet up again, she says this.
It's hard keeping your heart open. It makes you vulnerable, but it doesn't make you weak. And I have to believe it's worth it.
Keep those lines of dialogue in mind as I talk about the last few episodes. Finally, Shadow Weaver returns, and it looks like she has a plan to finally stop the alien invasion. I love how when looking into Shadow Weaver in this last season, you ask yourself, is she a good character? No. Is she an evil character? Also, no. It never feels like she's fully joined the heroes, and unlike with Catra, the show isn't trying to make us feel that way, because Shadow Weaver doesn't need to. Anyway, Adora needs to absorb the failsafe and take it to the heart of Etheria. The problem is that only She-Ra can take it to the heart without being destroyed, and Adora has been having a lot of trouble transforming. Shadow Weaver tells her that it's because of her affection for Catra, and her emotions are too complicated to focus on in a time like this. Adora transforming is becoming harder and harder and harder. Now seems like a pretty good point in the story to talk about conflict. Most works of fiction center around a character with both an internal and external conflict. An external conflict can range from anything from saving the world to saving a sandwich from being eaten by someone else. An internal conflict is tied more to the character's personality, relationships, emotions, trauma, stuff like that. In my opinion, the best stories are the ones that can combine these two to the point where they feel like one. Adora's external conflict is that she needs to save the universe by taking the failsafe to the heart despite her inability to transform into She-Ra. Adora's internal conflict is that she's worried that her emotions and love towards other people are holding her back and keeping her from transforming. The pieces here fit together so well that it's incredible. The stakes feel so much higher than they would be if Adora only had the external conflict. It doesn't matter how big the threat is if you aren't invested in the characters. Anyway, Shadow Weaver makes Adora determined to do this, even if it might destroy her, and Catra doesn't want that. She tries to sneak out in the middle of the night, but the absence of Milog wakes Adora up. I haven't talked about Milog yet, but Milog is a really clever way to extend and reflect Ketra's character and feelings. And the best part is that Milog does it without any words. When they fight, it's essentially Ketra fighting with herself, and that's exactly what an internal conflict should be. The scene where Ketra leaves is so well written and absolutely heart-wrenching. Now you might be thinking, main characters splitting up right before the endgame? Poopy trope! If you don't know what a poopy trope is, it's a plot point where two or more characters get mad at each other and split up right before coming back together at the end. Now you might remember this trope from, I don't know, pretty much every 2010s animated movie from a major animation studio. Sometimes it works, but a good 75% of the time, no. She-Ra does this trope in a way I wish more major animated movies would do. In most of those, they usually paint one or more characters as right and another one or more characters as wrong. And it's even worse when they get it mixed up and it feels really stupid, like in Scoob.
I never thought I'd say this, but Simon Cowell was right! You can't count on coaches!
Here, I don't think the writers were trying to make it so we're supposed to agree with Ketra or we're supposed to agree with Adora. When you look at both characters and the decisions they've made and what they've been going through in the last few episodes, both of them are in the right and in the wrong. We can see both of their struggles and sympathize with both of them as their emotional journeys in this show come to a close. After 50 episodes, it's all come down to this, the show's two-part finale, cleverly titled Heart. Ending a story well is insanely hard to do. Every arc and story needs to culminate perfectly in a believable and satisfying way that fits with what has happened leading up to this point. Imagine if Whiplash didn't end with that breathtaking final concert and instead it was just Andrew and Fletcher fighting in giant robots for the fate of Jazz and the world. Okay, that would be pretty awesome, but it wouldn't make the movie feel complete, and it certainly wouldn't be my favorite film of all time if they went in that direction. She-Ra could have taken the easy route and gotten rid of the whole failsafe thing, and just end it with Adora going up to Horde Prime's ship to fight the clones and Horde Prime himself. But it isn't like that. The ending of a story should reflect what the story is. She-Ra isn't stop Horde Prime, that's what this final season has been about, but that's not the core. These final 2 episodes put full focus on what's most important, its characters. And the results are just wow. The first episode starts with Adora trying and failing to bring out the sword, unsure of why that is, but she's able to transform when she goes out to give the big plan to the others, but a look at Shadow Weaver brings her out of that form. Once they're outside, Adora is confident that Ketra isn't coming back, and she tells Bo and Glimmer not to come to the heart with her. They say they'll always have her back, and that gives her the power to transform once again. After they get to the beacon, we cut back to Ketra trying to leave the one she loves and her emotions behind her. But like I said, Milog is a reflection of Ketra's feelings and tries to stop Ketra. Milog knows what Ketra is actually feeling, despite her expressing it in an unorthodox way, by leaving. We get the single best action scene in the entire show, and then we go back to Adora, Bo, and Glimmer walking towards the heart. Just like Milog, this cave/tunnel thing has always been a really great way to reflect on a character's emotions. This finale shows it, and it hits hard. Adora thinks she hears Ketra, and she runs towards the voice and the hologram of Ketra. Ketra rests her head on Adora, and she pops out of She-Ra mode. For a brief moment we see her smile, but the smile disappears once the hologram of Ketra vanishes and She-Ra is back on, only to reveal a dark, empty pit standing before her. Adora starts to flicker again, now more determined to get to the heart than ever before. We see Ketra witness Horde Prime's plan begin, and she realizes what she must do. Running away is not going to help her or Adora. Back in the tunnel, the She-Ra flickering continues, and Adora keeps moving forward, blocking out all of Glimmer and Bo's calls. She closes her eyes and opens them, only to find herself where she found the sword. Back where she was called to her destiny. Back where she first became She-Ra. She thinks the reason all this is happening is because of her being distracted, and she leaves Bo and Glimmer, thanking them for being the best friends anyone could ever ask for. Ketra returns to the hideout and calls Shadow Weaver out for what she did to Adora and treating Adora like a tool to obtain as much power as possible. The situation is getting worse. Horde Prime has only gotten stronger by taking control of Scorpia and Mermista. Ketra is fed up with Shadow Weaver needing to get to Adora despite Shadow Weaver not wanting to let her. She uses the same magic she used to abandon Ketra to help her. They make it to Bo and Glimmer, and while they head up to help the others, Ketra stays to help Adora. We finally get back to Adora, standing on the edge of a cliff overlooking a gorgeous view when Mara shows up. Despite not being in the show that much, Mara is one of my favorite characters and there is just so much to her, most of which is beautifully summed up in this one beautiful scene. Adora still insists she go to the heart and bring the failsafe. It'll mean the world to all her friends, but the question is, what will it mean to herself? Mara asks her that question, and she says it doesn't matter. She doesn't get to choose. She's She-Ra. And then, Mara says this.
You're worth more than what you can give to other people. You deserve love too. You're so close, Adora. Don't give up yet.
Her words start to affect Adora, but before she can do anything else, Horde Prime shows up. Keep in mind, this is all a response to Adora's emotions. The beautiful view isn't actually there. Mara isn't actually there. Horde Prime isn't actually there. Adora was close to taking Mara's words into heart, but the hologram of Horde Prime pulled her out of the moment. Reaching the heart is still important to her. After some more good action, we follow up Adora's fake encounter with Horde Prime, and this big monster squid thing infects Adora with Horde Prime's virus. The final episode starts with Ketra swooping in to save Adora and delivering one last "Hey Adora." Shadow Weaver is there too, and she brings Adora to the heart. They're so close, with Shadow Weaver urging to get that magic. Catra continues to fight the monster, even though Adora doesn't want that to be the last time they ever see each other. It looks like it's over her, but Shadow Weaver comes back and makes a sacrifice. Obviously, I've talked about Catra and Adora way more throughout this video, but Shadow Weaver and her sacrifice have been really difficult for me to put my finger on. I think she did it because she knew she couldn't change, because unlike Catra, she doesn't want to. She selfishly helped Adora get to the heart before, but now she does one last thing to truly help them. That interpretation might change when I rewatch the show again, but I'm still glad they didn't decide to fully redeem Shadow Weaver. Anyway, after all this time, the two of them finally arrive at the heart of Etheria. Yes, two. Catra and Adora. Adora can transform into She-Ra, but she doesn't care. She's going to do it. Sacrifice herself for the rest of the universe. And she tries to shoo off Catra. Catra could listen, run away, never having to think about Adora again, leaving all that behind. But no, she's done with that. Catra is done running from her emotions, and she stays with Adora as she falls to the ground. It looks like it's too late, and Adora apologizes before she closes her eyes for what Catra presumes the last time. Adora wakes up looking at her reflection. The scene starts quiet, until the beautiful score kicks in when Adora's friends enter the room. The dialogue is just these friends being friends, and being themselves. She-Ra isn't mentioned once. As Glimmer and Bow exit, Catra extends her hand out to Adora, but just as she's about to grab it, the vision of Horde Prime pulls her out once again. Adora gives up, and closes her eyes, but there's one thing that opens them back up again.
Adora! Please! You have to wake up!
They both reach for each other, failing to reach the other, but Catra needs to make good on her promise. She looks out for Adora and won't let her fade away. And then Catra confesses her love. Adora makes a shield to protect her and Catra. And then this happens.
You love me. You're such an idiot. I love you too.
And those 4 words ring in our heads as they kiss, and the world is saved. I mentioned earlier that almost every character relationship in this show reflects around one thing, and that's love. Not romance, love. There's a lot more to love than just finding the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. Love is a feeling, an appreciation and attachment to someone that the only person who can remove it is ourselves. Horde Prime may have come to the planet with armies and weapons, he may have affected many of the protagonists, but the other protagonists didn't stop. The unshipped people may have been losing for a while, but they still had their love, the one thing they couldn't lose. Catra and Adora were 2 different halves of a broken heart that came together at the end and finally gave each other happiness. Catra sees her emotions as a weakness after hiding them deep down for so long, choosing not to show them, even when they're apparent to her. Adora is able to show love towards other people, but she sees herself as unneeding of it. She's been told that She-Ra was the only thing that mattered, but it wasn't. Adora isn't She-Ra. She-Ra is Adora. She-Ra is nothing more than a giant sword lady. Adora is a complex character who has love, and the parts reminiscent of her friends in her new design reflect this. Catra and Adora both learn to open their hearts to the people they love. Opening your heart isn't just letting love out, it's letting love in as well. And the love that Catra and Adora share keeps them going. At one point, Catra thought that power would be the only thing that would make her happy. At one point, Adora thought being powerful would be the only thing to give her purpose. They were both wrong. I don't think She-Ra is trying to say power is bad. I think it's trying to say that love is power. Love gives us something power will never give us, no matter how long we search for it. A real reason. A reason to keep trying even if we fail. A reason to run into battle even if we know we'll lose. A reason to wake up in the morning even if all hope seems lost. And to open our hearts, we need to love ourselves. Love ourselves enough to improve. Love ourselves enough to give love to the people we appreciate and let them give it back to us. And if we're able to do that, the people around us will be happy. We'll finally be happy.